we're focusing at the moment, aren't we, on when we come together. What things happen when we gather on a Sunday, when we come together, what's God doing? And today we're going to be looking at spiritual gifts, gifts in the body for the common good. So I just wanted to spend a bit of time up front just looking at what spiritual gifts really are. And then we're going to look at probably one of the most preached about passages in the Bible. This is a passage that will probably be familiar to everyone. And it's the passage, it's 1 Corinthians 13. It's all about love. And this is part of Paul in the book of 1 Corinthians. He's got this 3 chapters all about spiritual gifts. And sandwiched right in the middle of those 3 chapters is this incredible chapter all about what love is, the role love plays in the church, and the power of love. It's so often preached on at weddings, and it is a powerful picture of what love should be like in a marriage. But actually, when Paul was writing these words, what he was looking at was the church. And what he was looking at is, what does a church look like when it is full of the gifts of the Spirit being used? And this chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, is his description of what a church looks like. So we're going to read through that chapter in a moment. And just for awkwardness, I'm going to go through it backwards, just for fun. When I was reading it, I thought, actually, when I was thinking about what God was saying, I thought, actually, if we look at this in the reverse order, then I think that's going to be something that actually helps us to see what God is doing with spiritual gifts and the way that they interact in the church. Now, on your sermon sheet, or whatever, I've heard about 5 different names for this, but on this piece of paper, you will see I've left a list of the different spiritual gifts. Now, I don't think this is actually an exhaustive list, because there are other gifts that crop up kind of on their own in one-off verses. But this is a summary of the 3 main passages that talk about spiritual gifts, and a summary of the gifts that get discussed in those passages. So we're not going to have time. If you look, you'll be happy to know I'm not going to go through every single one of those gifts. I did a quick tally up on the time, and I want my lunch too. So we're not going to look at every single one. But I'm just going to pick out a few of those and just look at what do those gifts look like in the context of the church. I always do this. I set my phone up and then forget to actually put the timer on. But don't worry, I will minus 4 minutes from my time, so we're going to be good. So just a few introductory thoughts on spiritual gifts. The term spiritual in our context, in our day, generally gets a bit misused, and we kind of think of spiritual as something a bit floaty, a bit airy-fairy. It's something that's not physical. And the danger is when we think about spiritual gifts that we think about things in the church that are kind of a bit otherworldly, a bit supernatural. And there is going to be that element with spiritual gifts, but spiritual gifts aren't about just a bit weird supernatural things going on. They're about very physical, very practical things. And the word spiritual here is actually talking about where these gifts come from. It's not a description of what they're like. It's saying that these are the gifts that are given through the Spirit. So it's through the Spirit that these gifts come. And we know from Galatians that we receive the Spirit through faith. So whenever we're using spiritual gifts, we're doing so in a position of faith, in a position of obedience to God, and a belief that God is going to be doing something through what we're doing that is going to go far beyond just the physical that we can see and that we can do. And these are gifts. They're not rewards. They're not badges of well done, here you are, have a gift. These are just things that God gives to the church. It's not something we earn. It's not something we have to strive to kind of wrestle from God. It's things that he loves to give out to the church, things that just flow from him because he loves the church and he wants the church to be a blessed and a provided for place. And these are the things that God gives that provide for the church. When I was thinking about this, I had just a kind of a picture of what I'm doing here. I'm speaking into this microphone, and it's coming out, I don't know, is it out of these amps, or it's coming out of an amp somewhere. And as I speak, this microphone just does what it does. It's close to my mouth, and it just picks up the sound, and it transmits it to the speaker. And the speaker just does what it was created to do. It doesn't have to try. It's not striving for anything. It's not trying to earn anything. It's just doing what it was created to do. And the natural result of those 3 things, me speaking, the microphone transmitting it, and the speaker projecting it, is that my voice now comes across to all of you. If I take away this microphone, I'm not going to do it because it took a right long time to put it on, and I'm not going to risk taking it off. But if I take it off and move it away, the microphone isn't going to pick up my voice anymore, and it's not going to transmit anything. And if I give the microphone to someone else, the microphone is going to pick up their voice, and by that doing what it naturally does, it's going to project that over you. And as I was thinking about this, it's kind of like if you imagine this is going to stretch your imagination to breaking point. Just imagine for a moment I'm Jesus. Just bear with me. And this microphone is my spirit. If I am close to Jesus, then I will just be picking up his voice. And my natural thing, when I'm doing that, doing what I'm created to do, my natural thing will then be to broadcast that through to other people. So if you imagine I'm Jesus, this is my spirit close to Jesus' mouth. That is going to be my spiritual gift. That if I am close to Jesus, doing what he's created me to do, the closer that I am to Jesus' mouth, the more my spiritual gift is going to broadcast to you Jesus' voice. And if I take this microphone away from Jesus and put it somewhere else, then actually what's going to happen is that other thing is going to start coming through. Yeah. If I put this microphone next to my desire for recognition and my desire for people to praise me and to give me glory, then that's what's going to come through. As I start to do what I was created to do, actually the thing that's going to come through in my spiritual gift is not the words of Jesus bringing love to the church, but it's going to be my desire that's going to be coming through. So I just want you to hold that kind of picture in your heads as we start to look at this. So let's look at this passage. It's going to come up on the screen, or it's on your insert if you want to be following along on that. Paul writes to the Corinthian church, "If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith so as to remove the mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will cease. As for tongues, they will pass away. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, but we prophesy. We know in part and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love." Paul then spills over in the next chapter. He says, "Pursue love and earnestly desire the spiritual gifts." See, love is the driving force with all spiritual gifts. So I just wanted to take a few moments just to look at what is God's plan with spiritual gifts. Why has God given these gifts into the church? What's his idea? Now, one of the first things, might even be the first thing that God ever says to a human, is these words that are about to come up on the screen right now. It says, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it.'" You see, right from the very first moments of creation, God's plan is to take humans and use them to spread right across the earth an image of what God looks like. Humans were created to carry God's image in them and to spread that image across every single meter of this planet. We've just been praying right now for God to move, to bring revival, to bring healing in the nations, for God to be bringing a revelation of himself throughout the nations. And that's not just a one-off thing that just seemed like a good idea at the time, so we thought we'd do that on a Sunday. That's the very foundational command that God gives to humanity right at the very moment he creates them. Go take this image, bring revelation of who God is right across this earth. That's good. And that's what spiritual gifts are designed to do. They're here to bring a revelation of God right across this earth. You see, one day we look forward to a day, we've been praying about that day when the knowledge of the glory of God is going to fill this earth as the waters cover the sea. We know there will be a day when Jesus will return, when Revelation says that God will make his dwelling with man, that heaven will come down to earth, and everything will be united. We will see Jesus as clearly as we see each other now. But right now, we're not living in that day. Right now, that is a day that is to come. But God has given spiritual gifts to bring that revelation of him into the present right now. So that as we are using our gifts to one another, as we are just going about doing what we've been created to do, using the gifts that God has given us, we bring that revelation, that picture of Jesus that one day will be as clear as day, one day will be as physical as anything else that we see before us. We're here to bring that revelation to us right now. In the church on a Sunday morning, what happens is that all those gifts come together at once. It's the only time in the church week where suddenly every single spiritual gift is in one place. We see it in a small scale in life groups. We see it in a small scale in prayer meetings. We see it in a small scale when we just meet each other throughout the week for whatever reason. But on a Sunday, we see the whole body come together. We see every spiritual gift in one place. So we should be able to see the clearest vision, the clearest revelation of God's character that we can see. This is what God has designed spiritual gifts for. They're a temporary way. As Paul says in the end of this passage, as for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. These things are temporary pictures. They're not going to last. When Jesus comes again, we're not going to need spiritual gifts because we've got the full revelation of God right here, right now. But these are temporary things that God gives us to bring that revelation of him into us. These spiritual gifts are not going to get replaced by a full revelation of God. These are not things that God gives us just to keep us happy for now. You know, when you kind of got your little kid with you, you know that you just need to buy a bit of time. So you think, okay, what can I do? I'll give them a quick sweet. I'll give them a goodie bar. Let's just buy a bit of time, and then eventually we're going to get wherever we're going, and they can actually have something that's satisfying. That's not what spiritual gifts are. Maybe that's just my parenting. I'm not getting a lot of nods. That's not what I do. I'm just going to revise that. But yeah, spiritual gifts don't get replaced by a full revelation of Jesus. They are what grows into the full revelation of Jesus. Paul uses 3 pictures in this section. He says, when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. Then he gives the picture of a child growing up into a man, and the childish ways of previously fall away before the maturity that then comes. And then his last image, now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. He's got this picture of these kind of ancient mirrors. I was trying to find a picture so I could put it up on the screen, but they're all rusted, so they don't work. But if you polish bronze really well, you're going to be able to look in it and see a very kind of hazy, but, you know, still a recognizable reflection. And this is Paul's image here. We can see now this kind of hazy picture. It's not the perfect picture. It's not the full picture, but it's a picture of Jesus. That's what spiritual gifts are given to us. And I just want to look at that picture that he gives us of a child. Now, I've got a picture to go up. Who can tell who that is? Let's get the next one. Does that make any clearer? Let's keep going. Yep, I'm hearing someone's good. That's me. Powerful fashion sense, as you can tell. And the last one. And then you don't need an up-to-date one. This is the full revelation here before you. But you see, if you see that picture, that's me growing up. You can see, if you look at it, there's common traits that go through each picture. You can see with the smile, the way the cheeks kind of like fold back in on themselves to get around, the way the eyes narrow as the smile goes. You can see the common traits coming through. And that's what it's like with spiritual gifts. We get the picture of Jesus that grows into the full one. And we can see common traits that are coming through that picture that we're going to see in fullness when he comes. And for Jesus, the common trait that runs through him that is going to build into the full revelation, that is love. The common trait that runs through every single picture of Jesus we see is one of love. So spiritual gifts are given. Their purpose is to reveal Jesus. Their purpose is a revelation of Jesus. But the heart of spiritual gifts is love. The very heart of a spiritual gift is to show the face of Jesus to people. We're going to look in a few moments at kind of different ways that works its way out on a Sunday. But I just want to focus on this description first of all. Paul says, writing about this, and this is not just a description of love. This is a description of a person. This is a description of Jesus. This is the picture of Jesus that Paul sees as he's going along that road to Damascus, the persecutor of the church who's wanting to crush Christianity, and he sees Jesus before him. And this is the picture, this is the description that Paul gives of what that looks like. He says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. See, Paul is very familiar with this picture because he knows the depths of sin that he's been rescued from. He knows the sheer unforgivableness of what he was, and he sees the mercy and the love of Jesus. And this is what Jesus now gives spiritual gifts to us to do. He gives these spiritual gifts so that we see that picture. So as the church comes together, we see a clear picture of Jesus' love. In the book of 1 Corinthians, one of the main themes that Paul is hammering again and again and again is that in the church we are called to surrender everything we have for the benefit of others. That our self-esteem, our comfort, even our very freedoms that Jesus has won for us, we sacrifice if it is going to be of benefit to other people. And he comes now to this in one of the climaxes of the letter, saying this is what it looks like. This is the heart. When you are trying to use a spiritual gift, when you're trying to do any of the things that I've got written out here, this is the heart that you need to have. That doesn't say, this is what I'm going to do now, everyone look at me because this is going to be awesome. It doesn't say, we need to create a bit more time for me to do my thing because this is what God's given me to do. He said, no, this is the attitude that you have that says, I just want to do whatever I can do. Lay down whatever I can, sacrifice whatever I can out of love for the church, out of love for brothers and sisters. And as we do that, the face of Jesus comes through to us. But the key with that is that we've got to keep this microphone as close as we can to the mouth of Jesus. We've got to keep our spirits as close as we can to Jesus. And as we do that, actually, if we then just try and love the church naturally, if we just do what naturally God has created us to do, what's going to happen is we're going to discover spiritual gifts. We're going to discover ways God has gifted us to love the church. So I just want to look at a few of these and run through them and look at how this is going to work on a Sunday, what picture we can have of this. So the first one I just want to look at is the gift of encouragement. It's such a beautiful gift. If you can even think of any time you spent time with someone who's encouraging, you come out of that thinking that you can do anything, don't you? You come of that feeling an absolute $1 million. And encouragement is something that we see rooted right in the very person of Jesus. Everyone Jesus comes across, he seems to encourage. To a paralyzed man who's been lowered through the roof, he says, take courage, your sins are forgiven. To a woman who's been bleeding and reaches out to touch the hem of his robe, he says, take courage, daughter, your faith has healed you. To the disciples, when he comes to them across on the water and they think he's a ghost, he says, take courage, it is I, do not be afraid. And on the night he is betrayed, when he should have been thinking about what he's going to go through, he says to his disciples, in this life you will have troubles, but take courage, for I have overcome the world. Everyone that Jesus interacts with, he's trying to put courage into them. That's what the word means. The prefix "en" means to put into, to put within, like an envelope, something you put in. Encourage means to put courage into someone. Everyone that Jesus interacts with, he's bringing that encouragement to them. Paul can say in Philippians, if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from his love, and he's saying that with, of course there is. It's a no-brainer. Of course there is encouragement in Christ. Of course there is comfort in his love. And that's what we are called to do when we're operating in this gift. If you're an encourager, if you are someone who naturally just loves to encourage, this is what God is doing. This is what God is revealing through you. And the best way, one of the best ways we can encourage people is just to be with them, to stand with them, to reassure them that they're not alone, whatever they're going through. I had an amazing example of this recently at my parents' church. The guy who was leading it, completely out of the blue, passed away and really shook the church. And the very first Sunday after they learnt of his passing, they had a couple who lead one of the other churches that they're connected to in the apostolic stream, just turned up out of the blue, unannounced. No one had even really actually in that church directly communicated with them, but they just turned up. And they said, we heard what had happened, and as soon as we heard, we knew this is where we need to be this Sunday. We've seen things like this before, and we knew you need people just to come and to be with you. It's such a powerful picture of Jesus just wanted to come and be with the church. And it doesn't have to be anything that dramatic. Actually, sometimes if we can see someone going through a hard time and we're just able to stand with them for a moment, just to be with them, to be looking out for them, asking them how they're doing, and just letting them know that someone cares. It can be the most encouraging thing in the world. I was really challenged when I was thinking about this. And this is one of, as Chris always says, when you point one finger out, there's three coming back at you. But I felt really challenged when I come into church on a Sunday. Do I look for where I'm going to sit, or do I look for my siblings? Am I looking for a seat or a sibling? Am I looking for where am I going to be? Where am I going to put my stuff? Where am I going to be comfortable? Where's going to be the best view or the most easy movement? Or am I looking to think, who needs someone to sit next to? Who needs a bit of encouragement? Just someone to stand with them. Another one we see on a Sunday morning. Let's make sure this is why I number my pages, so I know which one's which. We see leadership coming through on a Sunday morning. In Psalm 23, we're told, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters." Jesus is a leader who leads us gently beside still waters to bring nourishment and healing. And we can see this at work on a Sunday. I can almost guarantee it that any time where there's a response, there's going to be people looking out for people they've been chatting to in the week, of who this, we're praying here for people to have breakthrough. And you can see it if you look on a Sunday, there'll be people looking around thinking, I spoke to so-and-so, they need a breakthrough. I'm going to go to pray with them. I'm not going to wait for them to come down to the front and respond or put their hand up and respond or however it's happening. I'm just going to go to them. Megan and I were talking about this when we were planning it, because I was thinking, what example shall I use? And as we just started speaking about it, we just could think of example after example of times we've seen either someone bringing someone down to the front to us to be prayed for, or just seeing someone moving around, going out to people. That's leadership. Leadership doesn't have to involve a microphone or a platform. Just being able to say, I know you need something and I'm going to go to you to bring it to you. That's leadership. Another way we can see this is just wholehearted, abandoned worship on a Sunday morning. As we worship and just throw everything that we have on Jesus' feet and just say, Jesus, with every ounce of energy, with every breath in my lungs, I want to pour out my worship onto you. That's something that leads other people. I'm always struck by Paul and Silas when they're in the Philippian jail and they've just been beaten with huge sticks, thrown in jail, they're trapped with their hands shackled above their heads, and it says they start singing. They start praising God with everything they've got. And as they do that, it's not just their jail door that breaks open. It's every single door in the jail gets broken open. Yes. As we worship and as we just throw everything that we can do, it's not just our life that gets affected, but actually that can spill over into people. Those prisoners, Paul and Silas might never have even spoke to, might never have even met, might never have even spoke to again. But they'd seen a picture of the love of Jesus in that moment that burst into a jail and shattered their manacles, shattered the door and brought freedom to them. And that's what leadership can do on a Sunday morning. That we can just see Jesus going around the church, bringing comfort and healing to people. We see it in serving. It's an amazing spiritual gift. We're told about Jesus, he says about himself, even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Even Jesus says, I'm not coming here to earth for what I can get. I'm not coming to bring people to me, to bring things to me. I'm coming to serve and to lay down my life for them. And we'll see on a Sunday morning, you see that so often. We'll see before most of us have even arrived, someone has turned up far too early in the morning to unlock the doors and to turn off the alarms, and there's a team of people that come together just to set everything up. It's a picture that when we come to Jesus to worship, we don't have to do anything. Yeah. We just come in and we can be in the throne room of God. And there's a picture of that in the way our setup teams and our point deacons come and unlock and prepare everything. The band come early and get everything prepared so that when people arrive on a Sunday, nothing needs doing. There's a picture there of Jesus' love that prepares everything for us. The refreshments, we don't have to do anything for the refreshments. We just turn up and there's arrayed before us a beautiful selection of teas, coffees, cakes, and biscuits. There's a picture in there of Jesus. Administration is one of the gifts that I really wish I had. My theory is, if you hear about the gift of administration and you don't think, I do not have that gift, you've probably got that gift of administration. We're told about God, Paul says it in 2 Corinthians, God is able to make all grace abound to you. So having all sufficiency in all things, you may abound in every good work. We don't often think about God as this, but God is a God who prepares everything in advance so that everything can flow. God never gets wrong-footed or caught out or thinks, I wish I'd prepared that. God has everything ready for us in its season. And there's this beautiful picture in those who work in this gift of administration that just brings the smoothness of God, the foresight of God to prepare everything, to have everything established. When was the last time you turned up here on a Sunday and found out no one had booked the palace? It's never happened because we've got gifted administrators who are doing their work to set up things so that they just flow. Administration is one of the gifts that possibly more than any other is going to put a ceiling on the work of God if we don't get it right. Because God is a God who loves organized, practical things. God is a God who loves order, and with God things flow and are prepared in season. And administrators, we don't take them, we don't honor them as much as we should, but I just wanted to say this, that anyone who does administration for the church, thank you so much, because it brings tremendous blessing, tremendous benefit, and there is such a beautiful picture in there of Jesus' love and of how Jesus goes before us to prepare all things for us. We'll make this the last one, but we see it in prophecy as well. Prophecy is one of the most beautiful gifts because prophecy is one of the most literal examples of what I was saying earlier, of the words of Jesus coming straight across. When Brendan shared that word earlier, that was the words of Jesus coming across to the church. I remember once when I was leading the meeting and we'd had a few words in pre-service prayer, and we'd sung a few songs and there'd been no prophetic words coming out in the service. And I was praying and saying, God, please, can you just prompt someone, some sort of prophetic word that's going to come, that's going to bring something of your voice and your love to this service. And I just felt God's conviction on me saying, you had 3 words in pre-service prayer. What was wrong with those 3? And I just had this sudden moment of thinking, God spoke 3 times in pre-service prayer. God spoke 3 times I heard the voice of God. And I'm now here going, oh, come on, God, I need it again. Come on. And I just was so convicted that there was this moment of complete blasé indifference to the word of God. And I just remember getting down on my knees in the worship and being like, God, I'm so sorry. I have so undermined and undervalued your word here. And when someone stands up to prophesy, ever since that on a Sunday, I've always thought, I need to listen to this. This is God now speaking to me. This is the words of Jesus, the love of Jesus coming to me. You see, the love not only affects how we use our spiritual gifts, it affects how we receive spiritual gifts as well. When someone stands up to bring a prophecy, when someone goes out of their way to bring administration to the church, when someone is serving, what we do is we respond with patience and kindness. We don't envy or boast about anything. We don't get resentful or irritable that they've got this chance and we haven't, or that they're saying this again, and if I did it, I'd say it so much better. But we accept it in love because we know that this is Jesus now revealing himself to us. Yeah, good. As we come to finish now, I wish we could go through more, but like I say, I want my lunch too, so we'll leave it at those 5. I just want to finish. I was going to speak about teaching, but I'm hoping you can pick it up from this preach. So we won't go into details on teaching even. I just want to finish by looking at the one last thing, and that last thing is just the insufficiency of spiritual gifts. I've talked a lot about what spiritual gifts do, about how they reveal Jesus, but I just want to finish the way Paul starts by just mentioning that actually these gifts are not sufficient in their own right. That actually these gifts need that heart of love. That if all we do is focus on the gifts, if all we do is focus on, God, I want to prophesy, if all we do is focus on, I want opportunities to serve, if all we focus on is who can I go and encourage, and we don't focus on a heart of love, actually those spiritual gifts are not going to profit anyone else, and they're not going to profit us. Paul starts this, if I speak in the tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. You know, my brother is a drummer, and one time he decided it'd be hilarious if he woke me up by setting up his drum kit outside my bedroom and playing the drums as loud as he could. And he then found it particularly funny because then I couldn't get out the bedroom to get to him because there was a whole drum kit in my way, so I just had to look at him grinning at me while he played his drums. But I can guarantee you no one is benefited by a clanging cymbal, particularly not early in the morning. It is not nice. And that's what we can be like if we don't have love. All we do is transmit a sound that's not the voice of Jesus. All we do is transmit something that's not going to build up, not going to encourage, not going to bring consolation. When we use our spiritual gifts, we're imitating God. And that means we need to be utterly and completely consumed by love, because that's what God is like. And if we're not operating like that, if we're not living a life of love for the church, love for Jesus, then actually the thing that we broadcast with our spiritual gift is not a faithful representation of Jesus at all. In Ephesians 4, when Paul is talking about the gifts that Jesus gives the church, and he talks about the impact that they will have, and he finishes that section by saying that Jesus makes the whole body fit together perfectly. As each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts to grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. You see, love is the proof that the body is healthy. Love is the proof that the spiritual gifts are being used correctly and that the vision of Jesus is being faithfully broadcast across to the whole church. It was pointed out to me a little while ago that if we think of the first times we really see spiritual gifts get used is when the Spirit falls at Pentecost and the disciples burst out speaking in tongues and shouting. There may well have been some sort of prophetic thing going on as well, because when Peter tries to explain it, he starts talking about a prophecy in Joel where it talks about people being prophesying around the place. So we start to see these very dramatic spiritual gifts. And probably if we were asked to list spiritual gifts, the first two we'd probably talk about are tongues and prophecy. And as Paul is speaking in Acts 2 to the people, he says that this promise of these spiritual gifts coming out to you, this is for you and it is for your children. And if you repent, you can have this same Holy Spirit. And we're told 3,000 people get saved. But if you read it, we're then not told about anyone in that 3,000 speaking in tongues. We're not told about anyone in that 3,000 prophesying. Now, I'm sure they did, but that's not the point that Luke wants to get across. What Luke wants to get across in this story, when he talks about the Spirit falling and suddenly you get 3,000 people plus the disciples consumed by love for each other, this is the impact he says it has. He says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayers, and awe came upon every soul. And it says, and all who believed were together and held all things in common. They sold their possessions and belongings, distributed them to any as had need. If you don't think that needs a lot of admin, that is going to need a lot of admin. We're seeing that gift heavily there. And day by day, attending the temple, together and breaking bread in their homes, they received food with glad and generous hearts, praising God, having favor with all people. And God added daily the number who were being saved. What we see is an explosion of love in the church. We see in those verses an explosion of spiritual gifts coming out, but it's not necessarily the dramatic ones that we've seen in the earlier chapter. It's not necessarily the ones that we naturally think of, but it's these gifts of generosity, of administration, gifts of leadership. They're not just going to be all happening to rock up at the temple at the same time. There's people saying, come on, let's go worship together. What we see in this passage is a beautiful explosion of love in the church. And I just want to finish by looking at what can happen when that love is absent. Have we got, anyone recognize this house? Yes, fantastic. Oh, I'm impressed. That's Blenheim Palace. It's a bit down the road from our house. Our house is slightly smaller. But this house, my dad has recently got a job as a tour guide at this house. And he's been telling me lots about it because he loves history and he loves telling stories. And this house was originally given to a noble family, the Duke and Duchess of Marlborough, as a reward and as a favour. They were given this land and a load of money to build the house. And so they built this fabulous looking house. And for 3 generations, it was absolutely fantastic. But then what started to happen was the money ran out. And suddenly they started to have to think, okay, we've now got this huge house, we've got all these grounds, and we need to do some upkeep. We need to be paying for it to keep it in good order. And what you start to see through the subsequent generations of this family is actually the upkeep of this house completely destroys lives. You start to see people have to sacrifice their loves and their passions in order to find money to fund this. You see people trapped into bitter, horrible marriages because they needed to find a bride who would have enough money to get this going for another 10 years. So what you see is you start to see something that should have been divine favor, should have been a symbol of royal grace and love, actually becomes something that just became a millstone around their neck and held them down. Because what happened was suddenly there was just an object that they were pursuing. There was just an object they were trying to upkeep. And that's what can happen to us when love is absent. Suddenly church doesn't become a group of people who are an encouragement. Church doesn't become a group of people who reveal Jesus to us. It becomes something that we have to put energy into. And it's just hard work. And what happens is it starts to be a drag to us. And the spiritual gifts that should be flowing from a place of love suddenly are difficult and hard. And what happens is not that the favor of God that should have been coming through to us through them comes, but actually what happens is that we get weary and weighed down. And what happens then as well is the kicker is that then the whisper starts to happen, okay, church is too much work. The people are difficult. We need to withdraw. And actually when you're then in a difficult, hard place, you start to withdraw from the people and you start to think, okay, if I'm going to go to church, I'll go short and I'll just sit at the back and I won't talk to anyone and I'll try and leave soon. But actually the people are there to give you a revelation of God's love. And what happens is that not only do we start to feel cut off because we're just working to something dry like this building to try and keep it going, but actually the very people who are there to give us a revelation of Jesus' love, we start to feel like we need to separate from. In a few moments we're going to respond in various ways, but I wanted to as well give a response. If anyone is feeling, as they've been listening to this, like actually this is all good, but actually I'm not seeing this love right now, then I want to create space for us to pray with you, because love is one of God's gifts as well. We're told in Romans that God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit.